Today the topic that I'm going to share with you is accompanying the ordained and consecrated. And it's a topic. When I first was given the topic, I sat down and actually took it to prayer and just sat with it for a while to see, well, how important, first of all, this is, because one of the first things that I really realized was that it's not often that we're even given this as a topic to think about. How do we accompany the ordained and consecrated? Because quite often it's actually the reverse, how the ordained and consecrated accompany us. So it's something that I feel very passionate about, that the clergy, the religious, the consecrated are such a great part of our church, and that us as lay members of the church, we have such an important role in being able to support and work alongside and give back to those who give to us. And I guess just before I start, I'm very open to, if you would like to stop me at any point during the presentation, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to unmute yourself even and just butt in. I'm very happy for that. Or at the same time, if you want to put messages in the chat, Clara's going to look after those, and then we can answer those at the end. So we'll see how we go. So the background of the whole conference is based on this. Well, one of the readings that has been the basis of it is the reading in Luke 5 with the call of the fishermen. And so I just wanted to start the presentation with reading this. So one day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen, who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he'd finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch." This reading, it just reminded me that Jesus is sitting in our boats. He's in our boats today. He's in our boats for the entirety of this conference. He not only sits with us, or desires to enter our life and our hearts, but he's in the heart and life of the church in our own diocese. He's in the church in Australia, the church that has been through a lot the last couple of years. He's he's very present with us, and so this reading is really a starting point for all of us, I think, as to why we evangelize, because we need to keep in mind why Jesus evangelized and how he did it. And he did it in a very simple, humble way, by wanting to enter the life of the people he saw around him, the people that he saw that could reach out to others. And so no matter what role we play in our church, in our families, in our personal life, it's a reminder of that very fact that Jesus is with us, and that he is wanting us, from where we are, from our life, to then become missionary and to reach out to those around us. And then in particular today, with our topic, to reach out to the clergy and to the religious, the consecrated. So it's from our boat, from our life, from our heart that Jesus ministers. And this is something, I guess, a part of it as well, with the background that I have and the work that I do in therapy with others, in supervision with the clergy. I feel very strongly about the fact that we need to be in touch with who we are, our story, our life, our issues, everything that makes us who we are, so that we can be aware. Because the self-awareness for me is key to then being able to reach out and support anybody. So first of all, we need to be in touch with where we are, that place where Jesus comes to encounter me, because that is so vital, because whatever I give, the quality of that giving will be based on my relationship with God, with Jesus, and the awareness I have of that. So working together to care for and support our clergy and consecrated. And look, just apologies at the start if what I might do is shorten. My whole aim is our support of clergy, of religious, of consecrated. So I might just shorten it and just say clergy and include everybody, just for the sake of not stumbling over my words today. So it only makes sense that if we want our church to flourish, then we need to treat our clergy and religious with respect and kindness, while taking simple and practical steps to care for, to appreciate, and to collaboratively work alongside them. And I think working collaboratively is key. You know, our role is just as vital as the role of any religious, any clergy, and so I really invite you to take that on board today, the working collaboratively, because I think for a long time we've had that mentality in our church that the church is there, or our parish, or the prayer group, it's there to support us, not and perhaps sometimes we've fallen into that trap where, you know, they need to give to me. Well, the challenge today is to see, well, how can I give? How can I support? How can I build up the other? And so what I'm proposing for this keynote presentation is for the community to support the clergy and consecrated. And so some of the things we can start to think about are, what positive relationship strategies can we develop? It's not about a blame game. It's not about saying what is lacking, what is not there. No, because I think we're in a very precious moment in the church after the plenary council, where we want to build up. Yes, we're all very aware of the reality of the church, the reality of the suffering. So it's not to blame, it's to take on that attitude of how we can give, and how we are all members of a broken church, but in the measure that we can give back, we can heal, we can contain, we can give, and we can all give so much. So how do we create this relationship between the ordained, the consecrated, and ourselves? And so what I'd like to focus on is from the community where we live and base ourselves. So our clergy and our religious and all the consecrated, they pour themselves out during the week, you know, presiding at mass, at funerals, at weddings, at baptisms, taking communion to and visiting the sick or elderly in aged care facilities, providing direct pastoral care to parishioners and community members, praying for their sheep, all those people that they shepherd constantly. Then there's all the tasks that they have to complete, the administrative tasks, compliance-related tasks, all that red tape that sometimes chokes up a lot of our time, ensuring the building upkeep, leading Bible studies, prayer groups, running retreats, training staff, training volunteers, mentoring newly ordained clergy, undertaking spiritual direction, building relationships with community groups, drafting homilies. The importance of our clergy and consecrated in our community is so highly valued, just by saying some of those tasks that they are involved with on a daily basis. And I'm sure that list, that's not a finite list. There's so much that is done, and behind the scenes that perhaps we're not even aware of, the self-giving. And I think it's only when they're not there or they get sick does the importance of their presence really hit home. I know I had an experience in my local parish where, because I live in the Parramatta diocese, and so a couple of our parishes are quite small, and I was at mass, and well, I was going to go to Mass, but then a friend rang me to say that the Mass was cancelled. There's no Mass because our priest he got COVID, but then the priest that usually filled in for him was also ill. So it just really hit me in that moment, the humanity of my priest, my local parish priest, and how I took for granted, well, he's just going to be there, and then not to have Mass. And I think, through COVID and we're all very grateful to be able to go back physically to Mass, but not having the Mass, it was just such a great, in that moment, it was a bit of a shock to me, but it made me realise my priest is very human as well. And if he gets sick, he, sometimes he can't fill in, and how often our priests, our clergy just give themselves even when they are ill. And at the same time, the necessity to ensure that all our clergy, all our consecrated feel supported, encouraged, appreciated, so that their physical and mental well-being is sustained. And I think when clergy are well supported and healthy, they're better able to help care for others, and more importantly, they're able to thrive whilst doing so. And I think that's key, that for all of us, we all need to thrive in whatever we do, whatever ministry we're part of, our family lives, our work. It's not just to survive, it's to thrive. And so ordained ministry, as we all know, can be quite stressful and exhausting when unreasonable demands are placed on their time and energy. And because quite often I think, you can go with complaints or whatever, and sometimes we look to the clergy or the religious, they're meant to have all the solutions, to provide all the ministry, carry out all the social justice advocacy, coordinate all the communication, etc. Instead of parishioners also sharing in tasks and initiatives as collaborative communities of care. And quite often, like in the work that I do, I have a lot of people as well that will come to me and, complaining about this, or, we want this, or whatever. And what I quite often give feedback along the lines of, yes, I can hear you, but come to me with a solution, come to me with the problem, but then also having thought through, well, perhaps we could try this, because it's so much lighter. And I think for our clergy, for those that lead our church, I think that's so important. And it's just a very simple thing that we can all do to keep in mind, well, let's go, yes, let's pinpoint what we might see as issues or problems or areas of need, but then think through, well, what is it that we could put in to actually solve that? Because if we take that step, I think that's already a very important way that we can support our clergy and religious, because it means that I first challenge myself, because what am I prepared to give? What am I prepared to do? So I really invite you to take that on board. And clergy quite often feel pulled in a lot of directions, and that is going to have an impact one way or another. And I found some data when I was preparing this that which I thought might be useful in the presentation. And while there's not a lot of data about the physical, emotional, psychosocial and spiritual effects of ministry in Australia, the USA and the UK have got some data. So I'll just share with you some of that. So 90% consider themselves overworked. This is a clergy or religious, consider themselves overworked and report working between 55 and 75 hours a week. 71% have experienced burnout, which is quite high when you think about it. That's a lot. 70% constantly fight depression, which is that's extreme. 65% wrestle with anxiety. 63% are so discouraged that they contemplate leaving the ministry. 80% feel that the ministry has negatively affected their families, for those from the Anglican diocese where the data was taken. And these findings show that the relationship with parishioners greatly impacts the well-being of clergy, along with the chance to flourish in their ministry. And I know, working in the Archdiocese of Sydney, we have a clergy wellbeing 10-point plan, which aims to address some of these issues in order for the clergy to feel cared for. And we're still working on, administering that 10-point plan. But the question I guess I had was, however, what would it look like if all parishioners cared for and supported the wellbeing of their clergy and consecrated? It's all well and good, like from the archdiocese that I work in Sydney. We're trying as an archdiocese to put practical things in place so that there is this wellbeing plan, and that's a very practical, down to earth plan. But what would it look like if in every parish or in every place of ministry, those that were leading that felt cared for by those that they're shepherding? So some of the questions that we can take on board for ourselves are, well, what do you expect of your ordained ministers or the consecrated? How realistic are these expectations? Have you discussed them with your priest or the religious that you might have dealings with? Do you think you have the right balance between the amount of time you expect your priest to spend with those connected with the church and with those sheep not yet in the fold? How do you encourage them to give the best of themselves in their care of others? How can you help them spot or avoid developing unhealthy patterns of work and ministry? For example, not taking adequate time off and holidays, and the priests that I give supervision to, that's quite often one of our topics, So when's your next holiday? Have you booked it in? Have you planned it? So they're just some things that we can think about. And ways of supporting. One important way is respecting the boundaries around home life, the presbytery or the convent. It's really challenging, for example, when the presbytery is right next door to the church, or the living area is also communal, like for the clergy that, it is open house. I remember one priest I was very close to he had an open door policy into the presbytery, like there was the office, the communal area, and he's a very communitarian person. But that takes a toll, I think it's very important having the respect of those boundaries, because everybody needs downtime, everybody needs that space, and appreciating the call is to community and church, and thanking them for the work that they do. Quite often we think that, but do we actually voice that? Do we actually give that feedback? And being aware of the vulnerability that clergy face as public figures and supporting them in times of difficulty. Particularly now in this time post Royal Commission, it's a very challenging time. There's a constant pull, I think, of fear of what's going to come out next. People are being watched, all this sort of thing, and it is a time where we need to care for one another more than ever before. Prayer obviously is the most important way that we can support, but also offering practical help. So what practical help can we give? And helping, I've got a typo there, helping ensure that our clergy, our religious, take their retreats, take their holidays, have rec days, take days off. For all of us who are working full time or have, stressful careers, how important that time off is for us. So how important as well it is for those who are leading us in the church. And as I said before, coming with solutions when problems arise. And this one is my favourite, being loyal and avoiding gossip. I think this is something that is so important, and I'm the first one that I try to keep a watch on this in a personal way, because I think gossip really is very destructive, and yet it's something so simple that we can all fall into the temptation of gossiping. And I recently was involved with kind of mediating a situation where a simple, very simple thing, because of gossip, became very destructive and ended up affecting. It was involving 3 people in a church setting, in a parish, and then it became so destructive that it was started to really affect the relationship between the couple that were involved. And so we can think that it's harmless, but it's something that really we can take on board as our way of caring, by avoiding gossip, by avoiding saying unnecessary things, that we can actually, if that's the only thing we take away from today, I would think that would be a really important way of supporting. Avoid doing business before or after Mass, instead letting them focus on their spiritual preparation. This is a beauty. I've fallen into this trap. You come to Mass, or you want to, I'll just grab Father because I've got to tell him this. No, well, who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of myself. I'm not thinking of him. Or I'm not thinking of that religious or that consecrated person. They need that time to focus in order to give the best of themselves for the liturgy, for the prayer meeting, for the retreat. So is it my need that's being met? So that's something very practical we can all be part of. And collaborative communities of care. This is a way that we can all focus on what we can do to support. Collaborative ministry, collaborative mission, I think, is something so vital and so important. And by a baptism, we're all called to pray, to preach, to live the gospel. We're all called to collaborate. So it's not just the role of one particular person in our community. We're all called to listen, to speak, and to pray the word. And we're all called to ministry. And the more empowered I think that we feel by our baptismal calling, the more supported clergy and consecrated feel, because it's to step up to the mark, I think, to be reminded of that great call that we all have, and that's what connects all of us. It's not just some that are more important or more called. We are all called to that, and I think that can help us in being collaborators, in being supporters in our local communities, in our diocese, in our archdiocese, in our national church. We all have a very important role to collaborate. Some other questions that I thought might be helpful to think about. How do your clergy know you care and are concerned for them? How do they know? Do you know how this is received? Do you ask them? Do you get feedback? For example, another practical way, when a parish sets a mission plan, what will you include about the care and the well-being of the clergy? How often, because there's always, strategies, and quite often those strategies can be very, big plans for the year ahead, for the mission, for the building projects. It can be quite a stressful plan, but do we include into that the well-being of those leading? Do you know when your clergy have their ministerial review? Is there a way that you can feed into this process, or for your ministers to feed back to you as a way of feeling part of the process of caring? And of course that I thought about putting this in, but I kept it there because I thought, there are some ministers who would not be open to that, and that I respect that greatly. But then for those that perhaps would feel that as a way of receiving support, because quite often we can assume that they know how we feel or vice versa, but sometimes it's really nice to have that space where we could actually give some feedback. And how confident are you of talking to them about matters that concern their personal well-being? Of just siding up to your priest or that missionary in your local community or that religious, asking them, well, how are you actually going? Because even to ask that question and being open to what you might receive in response takes a lot from us. And I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. If I'm in touch with how I am and okay in myself and confident, then I'm going to pick up things. I'm going to pick up if there's something that's not okay, or perhaps if somebody needs a space to talk about or to check in, even, not that people have to open up with us, but to check in, do you have somebody that you can confide in, because you're looking really tired, you're looking stressed out, how are you really going? And in cases of great concern, how confident are you about talking to the relevant bishop or archbishop? And this, again, last week I had an experience of that as well, where it was in another mediation kind of setting, and I was really encouraging one of the parties, to make the bishop aware, because quite often our bishops or the leaders are unaware of actually what's going on the ground, but they have, they need to know certain things. So how confident are we of relaying information? But then again, that comes back to me and being connected with myself, and my reason for it's not to dob somebody in. If it comes from a place of real concern, I'm concerned for this person, is just to let them know, are you aware? And on the human side, I was reflecting on Moses, because Moses, as we all know, he was a great character in the Old Testament. He was ready to pack it all in a number of times. And in Numbers 11, he said there, well, why have you laid this burden on these people on me, to Yahweh? And he was very human. Moses was a great character, and he felt the ministry, the burden of the ministry. And, he's very expressive as well. He was exhausted. He was burnt out from the constant demands of the people. And I think Moses also learnt that he was human and that he needed to learn about vulnerability. And, this is where ministry is in relationship. It's so important that ministry is a relationship. All of us together, and that it has to be humanized. So we need to really find ways of expressing the mutual support, that we're together in this, to collaborate. It's a partnership, and at the same time not to be heroic. It's not us to provide all the support. No, it's a partnership. It's working together, and I think that's the most challenging. It's not about one being more important than the other. No, it's about listening, it's about receiving, it's about working together, of collaborating. And then if we are to care for our shepherds, then we really need to be aware of caring for ourselves, because if we really care for ourselves, then we will be connected with what the best support is. There's nothing worse than, and I've had this happen to me actually, where somebody will, they will sense something, perhaps I need to take a break, or I need, a bit of support or whatever. But if I sense that it's coming from a place of that's just not genuine, like we all sense it, I think. And I'm particularly thinking of one particular person who they are really struggling in their own life, and they're avoiding doing what they need to do, and what they're doing is actually pinpointing needs in somebody else when they really need to be caring for themselves. And I really believe that if we care for ourselves, then we are going to be great at caring for others. So even if you take away from this session as well, well, perhaps, you know, I need to get things in order in my own life. Perhaps I need supervision, or I need to talk to somebody, or I really need to take time out, or I need to get in touch with myself on a deeper level. I need to, you know, to have spiritual guidance. Then that might not be a direct way of caring for our ministers, our clergy, our religious, but in the long run, it's actually the best way, because if we care for ourselves, if we get more in touch with what's really going on in my life at the moment, then in the long run, we're going to be able to care for others. And just as a way of kind of shaping that, what that could look like for ourselves, I've just identified the 4 pillars that we use in the ongoing clergy formation, where there's the pillar of the spiritual care, the pastoral, the intellectual, and the psychological. And I'd also add there the mission as well, because if one area, because these are all areas that are important in our own personal life. So if, for instance, and I often use the analogy of a table with 4 legs, and you know, if one leg of the table is broken, you're not going to be able to sit your cup of tea on the table, because it's going to slide off and you know, fall on the floor. So in the same way, if one of these aspects of our life is out of kilter, something's going to be unbalanced in us. So for instance, if my spiritual life is not okay, if how is my relationship with Jesus? If that's affected, if it's not, if there's something a bit amiss there, then perhaps we can look into that. In the pastoral, the same thing. If there's something in lacking in the pastoral element of my life, in a need that perhaps is not being met, then there'll be gaps. Or on the opposite side as well, if I only focus on the pastoral, if I'm one of those people, for instance, that I'm out there, I'm running the soup kitchen, I'm giving communion to the sick, I, you know, cook a meal for the priest and drop it on a Friday night, care for everybody else, but as a way to avoid actually looking into my own life, well, that's not right either. It's got to be the balance. The intellectual as well. There's a lot of very intelligent theologians, intelligent people. Sometimes that can get out of kilter as well. We can focus so much on the intellectual that then we can be split and disconnected, and that's not good either. And then, of course, the psychological aspect of our life. If there's something, you know, with our psyche that needs caring for, that needs attention as well. So I just put those there as means of providing a kind of way of thinking about this, of caring for ourselves, and then in connection with caring for our ministers. And so just to finish up, I just wanted to take up this document, the Populorum Progressio, which kind of, it's a nice way that Pope Paul VI expressed some of this that I've been presenting today. And so I just wanted to finish with a couple of points in that. The first one is, he said, the development of peoples must be well-rounded. It must foster the development of each man and woman, and of the whole man and woman. And so that's in number 14. And then in number 15, it says, in God's plan, every man is born to seek self-fulfillment. For every human life is called to some task by God. At birth, a human being possesses certain aptitudes and abilities in germinal form. And these qualities are to be cultivated so that they may bear fruit. By developing these traits through formal education or personal effort, the individual works his way toward the goals set for him by the Creator. Endowed with intellect and free will, each man is responsible for his self-fulfillment, even as he is for his salvation. He is helped and sometimes hindered by his teachers and those around him. Yet whatever be the outside influences exerted on him, he is the chief architect of his own success or failure. And utilising only his talent and willpower, each man can grow in humanity, enhance his personal worth, and perfect himself. And then in number 17, each man is in, or woman is in also a member of society. Hence, he belongs to the community of humanity that should be. It is not just certain individuals, but all humanity who are called to further the development of human society as a whole. Civilizations spring up, flourish, and die, and as the waves of the sea gradually creep further and further in along the shoreline, so the human race inches its way forward through history. We are the heirs of earlier generations, and we reap benefits from the efforts of our contemporaries. We are under obligation to all people. Therefore, we cannot disregard the welfare of those who will come after us to increase the human family. And the reality of human solidarity brings us not only benefits, but also obligations. So I finished just with this beautiful picture. We're back at with Peter in his boat and Jesus there on the shore, and just as a reminder that Jesus needs each one of us, and the call today, I think, is for us to be mindful of how we can help those who minister to us and those who care for us.